Alright, welcome to the real AIAA expert. And if you're wondering what AIAA is, because I've gotten comments, AI Automation Agency, it's one of these buzzword business models like SMMA, Social Media Marketing Agency. And basically what we're going to talk about today is the best pricing models for your agency. You can take from me, I literally do $1 billion a month. Yeah. Go watch another video, see how much he makes. I bet you it's only like 20 grand a month. No, I do $1 billion a month. And that's verifiable. I left my proof at home, but it is $1 billion. So anyways, let's talk about the best pricing models. I have 4 written down here. So we have these 4. I'll go into them throughout the video, and then I'll reveal which one I think is the best and which one I'm really going to be focusing on moving forward. Here's my opinion on this so far. You should aim to do one of these 2 things. Either build valuable relationships, especially if you're watching this video, you're a beginner, right? And you need to figure out what to prioritize. And so just focusing on money is kind of short-sighted. Of course, if you were just focusing on money, you could go charge $10,000, try to get it all up front, and then just make sure they can't charge back and abandon it and whatever, just be a total scumbag. But obviously, we're optimizing for making money over the next 5 or 10 years, not just in the next 12 hours. And so, here's my kind of rules for this. First, build valuable relationships, and 2, productize things. So if you can productize something, then you should absolutely focus on that. But if you get an opportunity where it's not really productizable, it's maybe not the best opportunity, you won't make the most money, but it's for a nice company that you know will be worth more money going forward, or could be, then I think you should do that. So it's not always about like which one makes the most money. It's about which one makes the most money in the long term. And so let's get into the first pricing model. And this is the basic one. So this would be initial cost only. And let me just shut down my, there we go. So with initial cost only, this is like if you've ever built a website for someone, you usually like take some sort of deposit. You do the whole project, then you get the rest of the price. And then, like, I had a client where I built a website a few years ago. This was my first entrepreneurship project ever. I charged $250 for a website, and it actually took me a day, so it wasn't that bad. And then you set them up on, like, a hosting or account or whatever to host their WordPress site, and you walk away. And they pay for the hosting, and of course his site went down. Maybe he forgot to renew the domain or something. But either way, you just walk away, and that can be nice. So the one thing that I really like about this is I have, God, so many things running right now. Like, I have a few different apps that I've built, and I kind of end up pivoting and then building like kind of a new version of the app. And that old app still has customers that are like paying and using it, and so I don't want to just shut it down. And what happens is you end up with all these different projects that are running, and it's just like mental overhead. You know, you're always like the number one rule of software, basically, in my mind, is shit breaks, right? Even if you didn't design it badly, something will change and then it's going to break. And you just have this like kind of stress looming over your head. And if you just quote out the initial cost and walk away, you don't have to worry about it, right? It's their problem. If something breaks, maybe they can pay you or someone else to fix it, but it's not your problem, you know? Obviously, you should do the best job to make sure it doesn't break, but it's not your problem if it does. And yeah, you just feel responsible. But there are a few negatives, actually more negatives. So firstly, it's very hard to precisely kind of quote things out. Websites are kind of a good example with this, but a website's pretty straightforward. It's a few pages. Whereas if you're building something custom, especially involving like AI, sometimes the prompt takes a long time to dial in. Sometimes kind of different functionalities the client realizes they want. And it's really hard to get a good scope at the beginning. And so you either end up screwing yourself or the client. Most of the time someone's going to get screwed. And it's really hard to kind of quote this out. Then on top of that, usually what I like to do is set up my own infrastructure. So that means I have a video about this, but I use Trigger.dev, Supabase, and then like Vercel and Svelte for the front end. And I'll set up the project on my Supabase account, my Trigger.dev account, and my Vercel account. But that means I'm bleeding money, while I'm working on it, and while they're testing it. And then you have to get them set up on their own infrastructure, like their own hosting platform. And that can sometimes be a pain in the ass. And it could also be like a downside to the client if you're telling them like, look, you're gonna have to cover all this, software expense, which most of the time it's like nothing, but still they have to get set up with it and kind of worry about it. So it's maybe not that good of a deal for the client. And it can also be kind of like a lower LTV because you're just charging upfront and then you don't know if you're going to interact with them in the future, and it can be kind of limiting in that way. So let's move on to this way, which is initial cost plus kind of a maintenance charge. And this is actually what's really good for productizing things. So this is where you would charge like an upfront, setup fee or build fee. Like if you're selling a website, then you would build the website. Say you build it on Webflow, you would pay Webflow $18 a month or whatever to host it, which is insane, by the way, because a website costs nothing to host essentially. And then you would charge the customer, $100 a month. And with that, maybe they could request like small changes like images or, opening hours, whatever. And so there's some benefits to this. So this gets rid of the negatives from the initial cost where you have to switch all the infrastructure, because if you keep everything on your infrastructure, A, it makes things faster to build out, but B, you can already charge that recurring revenue on top of it. And maybe, if you're doing something with AI and you're using like OpenAI credits, like an API key, you don't know exactly how much that's going to cost, and it could be quite expensive. And it's pretty easy for them just to create an OpenAI key, and that's all you do, really. So that's what I would recommend. If it's something more expensive than just like hosting, then you can have them create their own API keys. But this also makes it much easier to productize your service. So you basically build out, you set up the database, all the workflows, the front end, everything like that. And then if another client wants to use that, well, it's often like either you could just duplicate, the database and stuff and build it out for that new client, which isn't that hard, if they want a bunch of changes. But you could always just like provision, that database for a new client and set everything up for that new client at a fraction of the initial cost that, the first client required to build everything out. And from there, you're basically selling a product. So if you sell something, like let's say it's like some chatbot that's built for a CRM, and it integrates with like a project management tool. Say you were to charge $5,000 for that. Well, once everything's set up, maybe you're charging $250 a month just to host everything and run it. Once someone else comes to you and says, hey, can I get that same thing? Well, they're still getting the same amount of value, so you can still charge them $5,000, but everything's already built. So you just sell it for $5,000 and it takes you a day instead of, 2 weeks. And all of a sudden you can do that. If you have lead flow, you can sell someone every day, and 5,000 times 30, that's like 150 grand a month. This, I think, is the way to scale. Yeah, it's fucking badass. So, yeah, and then you also get recurring revenue. So if you sell that chatbot, they pay $5,000 up front. They're probably going to feel, pretty invested in that. And so they might use it for like 2 years, which 24 months times 250 a month, an extra $6,000, you double your LTV just by charging that monthly maintenance fee. There are a couple cons to this. So like some people, if they're paying you, I haven't really had clients ask for the source code. I mean, some of them are interested in it, and I tell them, like, here's the source code's yours. But some people, if they're paying $5,000, they might want to see that, have kind of the ownership. And so you may have to explain to them, or you may just have to, like, sell it off to them directly. Then you also might end up charging less for the setup. I mean, you could end up feeling guilty, like, wow, I'm charging them $5,000 for a day of work. And so you may have an LTV if you charge like $1,000 up front and then they only stay for like 4 months, then you're making 2,000 instead of 11,000. So that could hurt your LTV. And then it's also kind of hard to like scope out the maintenance agreement. One thing you could do is just like, hey, if you want to make any changes to the system, you just pay me and I'll do that. But fixes in the original scope are going to be free. So if the original product was scoped out to solve specific problems in a specific way, and if it breaks, then you want to fix that with, for just the maintenance fee. But I do think, I don't know, because also the more dude, I was thinking about this last night when I couldn't sleep. Code base envy is a real thing. It's like the more you work in a specific code base, the more technical debt you build up because you make decisions as you go. And those decisions, even if they're like the best decisions, they start to have ramifications, and you end up just hating the entire code base because of the problems with it. And so if you're working on the same code base, the same productized product for a while, then you might start to hate it and get really sick and tired of working on it. And so if someone says, hey, can you just change this one little thing in there that should be an easy fix? Well, maybe it would be an easy fix if it was a separate project, but now you have to like go through and change a bunch of shit just to make this one feature work, because the code base is very bloated. Not even bloated in a bad way, but just like engineered for what it currently does, and it takes a lot of engineering to change the way it works. So yeah, that can be kind of a problem. But you end up almost having like a SaaS, and I think this is also one of the best ways to prove out a SaaS, where you build something custom for someone and you charge like a setup fee, because automating like the sign up page, the setup, a lot of this stuff could be a pain in the ass. And so if you just make it really MVP-ish and make the core product good, but you charge a setup fee, once you have people paying, $1,000, $2,000 setup fee, then you can charge $300 a month for that product easy, and just have people sign up on their own, or just sell them and like fully automate the product. But either way, that's kind of the initial cost plus maintenance model. Then we have the monthly retainer. The interesting thing about this is Custom AI Studio. This is a guy on YouTube. Maybe you're even watching this video. What is up, Javier? I forgot his name. But this company is pretty big. I watched a video of his. He said he had like 10 employees, or maybe even more, which is just insane. I mean, they're hiring at a rate of fucking nutty. I personally don't want to hire. But this is how they charge. They charge either... No way. Dude, this is crazy. They changed it. Wow, okay. So this was different like a week ago. But this used to be $2.25 an hour for consulting. And I'm guessing this would be like the initial kind of sales call, where they would get on and be like, hey, what's the project that you want help with? Okay, how will we organize that? So they used to charge $2.25, and then they would do $8,500. This came down from $8,500 to $4,500 a month. And this... It also used to say this was 10 development hours per week. So if you did the math, that was 40 hours per month. 4,500 divided by 40 hours per month. So now it's down to like 112. But initially it was 8,500 divided by 40 was $212 per hour. And so that was essentially how they were doing it, just a monthly price. And they explained it pretty well, because, and you can see this is my little description. Well, you're going to get a higher LTV, likely, especially because that client can keep requesting changes and saying they want different things, and you can just charge them for it, and it's all within scope, it's all great, it's all perfect, right? So you could probably get a higher LTV. This might be one of the highest LTV ways to do this, and you also don't need to scope the project. But this could be harder to sell when you're not saying like you're going to get this result. You have to specifically sell that in the meeting, and then kind of probably estimate like a price and a time frame. But yeah, like you're not saying, here, we're going to solve this problem for you as you would with a product. You're basically saying, we're going to attempt to build this for you, see how you like it, blah, blah, blah. And then I just don't like billing by the hour. I've never done a project billing by the hour, because I feel like it messes up incentives. Like, my incentive to lie is so high, and it's not even like a lie. Like, a lie doesn't have to be a lie, like a malicious lie. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, ooh, I only worked 1 hour today. I'm going to put 3 hours so I can make more money. It doesn't even have to be like that. It can literally be like, okay, I'm calling it quits. It's 3:42. I'm just going to call it 3:45, And maybe that's fine with you and the client, whatever. But if sometimes I get tired in the evening, I'm not as productive, and I watch a video while I'm working, like, it's just hard to, really, like, make it fair and reasonable, So I don't really like this model, but I do think you can charge a lot of money, and you could probably get higher LTV clients where you're just charging kind of by development. Lastly, we have the fractional CTO model, which I think is pretty interesting. I've personally thought about kind of offering this service. I haven't yet, because I haven't felt like I'm really ready to take on a big project. But basically, it's pretty self-explanatory. You join the company, and you take a share of the revenue. You're a fractional chief technical officer. So if you think about like an e-com marketing agency, they might say, "Hey, we'll run your ads and do everything, and then we'll just charge 5% of the revenue that we bring in." Or a growth operator where you're like creating a product for them and you're helping them sell it. You just take a percentage of the revenue. And this is pretty straightforward because if you can quantify exactly how much money you're bringing in, then you can just take a split of that and Bob's your uncle, right? And you don't even have to be like a fractional CTO. You could just take like a split. But I think it's really important to be able to assign a value. Unless you're becoming like a real CTO, like a co-founder, it's really hard to quantify what you're bringing in, especially on the technical side. Because you might be able to say, hey, look, we're saving this amount of time and this role costs this much, and so we're saving that role. But things change, and it just ends up being really complicated just to track that. So I don't know if that's, worth it, but you get a total cut of the revenue, so that can be a lot, depending on the size of the business. But, it could be difficult to sell if you're coming to a business that's already doing $100,000 a month and you say, hey, let me get 5% of that, to build. They might be fine doing it, as like a one-off kind of monthly fee, as with the monthly retainer. But if it's just like selling the, just like yourself and on like an indefinite time span, like that could be really hard to sell. The last problem with this is you could so easily fuck yourself by partnering with a fucking loon, dude. There's so many loons out there. Like, this will be, like a third of my inquiries where it's someone who's not technically savvy. They're not even business savvy. They're just some loon who has some loony idea and they go, dude, this could be $1 million a month business. We just need this product and you're going to build it and then you can have 50% of the revenue. Here's one thing I will say about these guys. They're very generous with their money that they don't have. They don't have any money, and they're probably not going to make any money, but they are generous with it, so hats off to them, I guess. So yeah, I mean, you just have to be really careful when you're talking to people like that. But without further ado, that brings us on to the best model of the bunch, and you could probably tell it's this one, initial cost plus maintenance. I haven't really done this. I mean, typically I'll just do like an upfront charge, especially if it's something I'm building on their Zapier and I'm setting up stuff for them, and I don't really want to stay involved. But I think if you, like, okay, especially once you start building out a product that could be productized, so maybe you start out with your first projects being cost only. So you look at the project, you get a good understanding of what problem you're trying to solve, and then you quote it out, okay? And quoting it out doesn't just mean like, I'm going to say a really big number just to like, be cool. $5,000. Then they say yes, and you go, yes! But then you start digging into the project, you realize you underquoted, and so you actually have to like sit down, spend 30 minutes to an hour, like researching the APIs you're going to be using, figuring out, like looking for references of things that are already doing something like this, kind of wireframing out what you want it to look like or how you want it to work, and figuring out where all the problems and intricacies are, because I guarantee you there's going to be like 5 or 10 things that are really fucking hard to do, and you think they're going to take 20 minutes, but they actually take a day or 2 days, and if you end up with 10 of those projects, or 10 of those problems on a $5,000 project, like boom, you just lost like basically all of your profit, or you might as well go and get a job, and so I think this is a good way to start, as long as you're doing your best to quote things out accurately. But then once you build something that someone likes, and if they refer you to someone else for the same product, or if you see that it's providing a lot of value and you think you can do your own marketing to get that out to people, then I think it's an absolute no-brainer to start selling it at initial cost, like setup cost plus maintenance, because the project you build for someone else is going to take extra work to integrate with a different person's systems. Like they might have a different CRM or project management system or whatever, and so you have to build out all the APIs and stuff to connect it, and insert their OpenAI key into the database. But once that's all done, I mean, like, it could take you, the core of the logic in the product is already built, so it might take you way less time to build out this other version. And you could charge the same initial setup cost, host it on your infrastructure, and charge them like $250, $500, $1,000 a month for maintenance, hosting, and different expenses. And I think this is the best model. I think this is the way to scale, because I already have a couple projects where I built them and I go, okay, this is something that people find valuable and they could buy from me on a recurring basis. And it's not something that's valuable enough to turn it into a SaaS. So the problem with SaaS is your LTV is so low. So if you charge, I'll give an example. I have this app for the CRM, and it does call summaries. It takes a phone call recording, it transcribes it, and it summarizes it. And if I take like a client, when I built this app on the App Store, let's say I charge $50 a month for the app, right? And that app got 50 installs, but not everyone added a card. Not everyone even paid $50 a month because the pricing structure was different. But let's say I get, 50 $50 payments. So that's $2,500 in payments. Some clients keep it for a few months, some, keep it for one. Well, if that was 25 different clients, I made $2,500, $100 per, on average, per customer. If I had just gone to each customer instead and spent an hour like building out this productized service for them and said, hey, I'll charge you $500 and build this out, 25 clients times $500, that's $12,500. Even if you don't close everyone, if you just close like 10 people, you're still doubling the amount of revenue you make. And sure, I mean, it's a little bit more work, but you have these customers that are worth way more, and you could charge maintenance on top of that. So you could probably charge an additional $50. So sometimes it's good to turn it into SaaS, but sometimes it's just not even worth it. And I think in a lot of cases, you're going to make more money just kind of keeping it closed down, because people would rather pay for a service than a product. It's weird, but if you're charging like for a like consulting, you can charge $2,500 and charge $200 an hour, and people are fine with that. But if you have a software and you're charging $200, people are gonna throw a fit. They're like, oh, this is too expensive, blah blah blah. Dude, imagine if you built a to-do app, for the iPhone. Like I use Notion. I pay $10 a month for Notion. This is worth so much more to me than $10 a month. If someone independently came along and said, hey, I have this tool called Notion, no one else is using it, but I'll give it to you for $100 a month, I would absolutely pay it. But they have to charge $10 a month because they have to appeal to the masses, because they can't charge that much. It's kind of like a chicken and the egg, I guess, in that way. But either way, productizing everything is the goal. I think start out here, productize what you can, and then make money, fuck bitches. That's the video. Subscribe for more. PewDiePie! Oh, God.